Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week we get a Star Citizen Live talking about all things ships. Inside Star Citizen showcase lots of various interactions, including lighting, doors, and alarm systems. Plus, we got a very cool look at the latest progress on the colonial settlements. So this week's Inside Star Citizen was another great episode, and it kicked off looking at player interactables. Now, the interactables in Star Citizen define how reactive the environment is, they define how real and immersive it reacts, and is a big part of driving this emergent and immersive gameplay of seeing something and immediately understanding it and expecting it to behave in a certain way. Now, this is what is great about the approach Star Citizen takes, and why physicalizing everything is important. As players, we will be able to look at something, and even if we don't understand exactly how it works, applying logical thinking and logical steps will actually allow you to handle a system because it makes sense, which is something that I really like about how Star Citizen is being developed. It isn't just a random mini game that has no relevance to what you're doing. It is something that is logical, and that is a major importance in this game. They also showed us an interaction zoo for the lighting setup and how players can turn lights off and on and remove or replace them, and then have them react in a logical way based on how the player interacts with each item or component. Like the example shows here, damaging a light and replacing it with a new one will bring the lights back on. Next up, we got to see some work on the doors system, which shows how we will be able to use panels to lock and unlock doors, depressurize and pressurize rooms, and toggle on the auto open feature, which will eventually play into the permission system, and you can grant each crew member permissions to go to certain areas or not, and depending on their actual permissions will determine whether they can get through that door. If the power to a door is lost, then the door will stop working. If the door was shut, they showed us this device that could prise the door open, and I really loved the look of this device. It has so many amazing gameplay opportunities. Or some doors could have physical locks that require cutting or lock picking. So not all doors will be the same, and you'll have to determine the best tool for the job. Be great for when exploring derelicts or derelict space stations, or as a pirate trying to break into places. There is so much opportunity for this system. Beyond these systems are alarms, so triggering an alarm, the event will then be passed through the environment via chains of devices that can be interrupted or altered, which creates again huge gameplay opportunities for how you approach and handle each situation separately based on your actions and the systems that you're coming up against. Stealth gameplay, for example, requiring you to bypass the system. Now, I'm so excited to see these systems are now getting the attention, as this touches so many areas. Ships, space stations, bases on the ground, and facilities, even your own player-built homes. All locations will have systems similar to this attached in some form that require the player to think about how they work and how to get around them or use them for protection. So, for example, if you own a homestead, you will want to protect it with some sort of locking and alarm system. So I'm very excited to see this. And it is also great, I must say, to see Calix Renault back in the spotlight. We haven't seen him on screen for a long while, and I used to love listening to him talk about some of these systems that he was working on. So welcome back, Calix. So after this, we had a sprint report, kicking off looking at the Esperia Talon, which we got to see the iridescent material for the hard surface shader. This, they said, is the first implementation of this shader, and we will definitely see more of the Talon until its scheduled release in 3.12. Next up, as they revamp and unify the ship radar and scanning, the vehicle team has progressed on what they call the Radar Object Collection Subsystem. This will form the basis of finding and filtering almost anything with an ambient signature. As you can see, they toggle between resource sensors, which shows you the mineable rocks, and the IR signature, or the infrared signature, which then shows you where the cutlass is. And if they only use cross-section scans, it can show how the scan data is lost once the cutlass is hidden behind an asteroid or whatever object that is. This also will apply to players and NPCs alike, and it's going to be very interesting seeing these radars and scanner improvements come to life, especially when they start reacting to players, and how FPS armor and weapons will give off emissions and signatures as well. So a lot of gameplay involved in that one. Work on the refinery decks continued. They're looking at some of the exterior infrastructure and how it sits within the gas clouds. They did say with this scene they might add a few more asteroids to give a bit more character, but they do want to make sure that the trucking lanes are not always cluttered, but more on actual refining gameplay next week, Jared says. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that's going to work, and 3.12 is going to look incredible with these gas clouds. So finally, we got to see the latest work on the colonial style homesteads. They brought the raw 3D meshes onto a planet in engine to get a visual idea of how they look and feel on a planet, and this will help them drive the ways that they implement them once they are out of concept and actually built into viable game assets. So there's still a lot of work to be done here. This process, they said, helps to evaluate things like shape language, how they feel and look against certain landscapes, what kinds of stories can be told, and even help identify what structure types may be missing from the planned selection. At the very least, as Jared says, it's a great look into Star Citizen's future when one day frontier towns full of NPCs with jobs and missions can be found throughout the verse, and then a little later, players building outposts of their own. I hope you spotted the sneaky pyro crab block out as well in the background. Bit of an Easter egg there, but it's still pretty cool to notice that these creatures may be roaming around these areas. And one of the missions, like the classic Elder Scrolls, we've got to take out the rats in the basement. We could have a series of shooting pyro crabs. I don't know. We'll see. But this whole scene is extremely exciting to me. I am getting strong Star Wars vibes from this. And do bear in mind that these are just one style and type of outpost that we will see. It is going to be incredible when planets and moons are populated with these locations, both big and small, providing so much gameplay opportunities. I just cannot wait. Anyway, that was Inside Star Citizen. As I say, a great episode. Do let me know your thoughts. Let us move on. So this week's Star Citizen Live was talking all about vehicles with members of the vehicle teams. The first question is, what are your teams working on right now? And the first person mentioned that they're working on the missile operator mode, which is coming next year. This will make missiles feel more functional and critical to combat gameplay. They're also balancing missiles and torpedoes, and they want ships with torpedoes to be very impactful, and when a torpedo hits, it'll cause a lot of damage. Right now they're working out what the operator mode and seat station will do and allow, as it will change up the multi-crew mode quite a bit. Very excited to get this missile operator mode. It'll be nice to have a proper dedicated station for a second player, other than just turrets and, I suppose, the pilot seat. They've also been working on missile and countermeasure gameplay. A few fixes were brought in with 3.11, but for 3.12 they will be improving the countermeasure gameplay further, like being able to choose how many countermeasures you want to drop. The bulk of the work is complete now, and they are looking into capacitor gameplay, which will bring a few more restrictions and make players consider more of their sort of resources for weapons, thrusters and shields, and if they want maximum effect they'll have to manage that sort of power triangle better, but they are working on them as well. But the weapon part is now completed, they're just finishing the rest, which they said will bring some more interesting and exciting gameplay. Now they're also working on docking. This is a major feature and focus right now. The MFD future work is also important work that they're doing, and they're also bringing this intelligent flight control system tech, or the IFCS, to give to AI to give them more features on ships, as well as expanding that IFCS movement system to other systems like EVA, like we heard in the monthly report. So there is actually quite a lot of stuff going on right now for ships, and it all sounds pretty interesting. Anyway, the next question is, will combat be slowed down to be closer to the intended ship space combat maneuvering speed, as most ships don't use it? Now they said they do have a combat summit coming up, which is a time when they'll discuss all things combat and, you know, trying to arrange another plan. And one main focal area is to break down where the combat speeds should be, so they will review this and make sure that it is heading in the right direction. Someone asked if they will fix the Gravlev vehicles, and they said it's been on their wish list for quite a while now. He did say they don't have a definitive plan, and it's quite low priority at the moment as they are focusing on spaceships. Once they've finished those areas, then they'll move on to Gravlev and ground vehicles. But they're probably going to create lots of different versions and prototypes of Gravlev, give it a quick test and see how it feels, and then go from there, but no actual plan at this time. Next question is, the time to overheat is very low, so ships overheat very quickly. Is this intended, or what's the plan there? And they said the current overheating system is purely based on how much afterburner people are using. They're not happy with it at the moment. It is very linear, and they want heat to be a long-term consequence and the management of energy to be the short-term. So there's a lot of deeper gameplay coming there, and a lot of this will be to do with capacitor gameplay and the generation, resource and item control system and physical components, but I guess they're not really adjusting that too much yet until they get those systems in. Next question, are there any news on ramps or elevators hitting the ground reliably and not lifting the ship up? It's a good question. Now, they said they have tried things like inverse kinematics, but that just created more issues. They said the plan is to really accurately model the physics, but there needs some more work to solve this issue, but they are definitely making strides towards it. It is also a similar system to the transit carriages and trains and elevators. They do want to try and physicalize everything to make them accurately simulated, which does in turn create its own problems, and it is quite difficult, but in the end it will be worth it. Next question, how do you decide when to do a balance pass on ships? So they said usually they will wait for when a certain feature is complete, like the IFCS or aerodynamics, and then they will do a full pass throughout the game. It is a constant dancing act or balancing act at the moment, but our feedback is very useful. The next pass is planned for when the capacitor gameplay does get placed in, as this will heavily dictate ship performance. Also, the plan for the next ship combat summit is to create a relative ship tuning matrix so they can have very precise numbers to compare ship performance, and they will probably get a ship in the gold standard or a gold state. Basically, this is the high-end level of where we want this ship to be, and then they will use that as a way to balance the rest of the ships. This is one of the great things about the way that they do develop Star Citizen, is that they can put these things into our hands and see what the reaction is and gather all the data from this to help shape and balance pretty much everything. It might be frustrating for us, the players, playing it sometimes, but this is kind of the blessing and the curse of the alpha that we have. It's great to get it all tuned and balanced and in a good place where we want it to be before the game is launched, rather than doing it afterwards. But for those who enjoy playing the alpha, it can often mean a lot of headaches. Anyway, next question is to do with landing aids. Are we going to get any? And they said they do want to bring back the landing UI, which had the 3D radar view with the model of our ship and the landing pad. And currently the UI team is building the ship radar in the building blocks tech, this new UI tech, which will allow them to iterate on it much quicker. So it would be a great time to revisit the landing radar. And what this will do is provide a third-person perspective of landing, but while remaining in the immersive first-person perspective sat in your cockpit. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, and I'm very excited to get that back. Although some people will disagree, I don't actually have trouble landing. Not all the time anyway. Next question. Have you considered EMPs being able to shut down the self-destruct process? Now, they said they don't want it to be super easy for pirates. There's a lot of balancing to be done there, but self-destruct would likely be a chemical process instead of an electrical process, and deactivating the self-destruct would likely require quite a bit more of a hands-on effort than just firing an EMP, and I do kind of agree there. It shouldn't just be a quick and easy fix for being able to take over a ship. There needs to be a lot of thought, practice, and skill involved. Next question. What is being worked on in terms of ship engineering systems? Now, as they've said, they're working on capacitor gameplay, which is kind of in parallel to heat and power, in which you configure your ship to how you want it to perform in a specific moment. If anyone can actually remember any of the videos in which people like Yogi Klatt talks about capacitor gameplay, I really can't remember exactly what was said there, and I want to delve further into it and get more of an understanding and maybe put it into a video, especially combining it with the engineering information we've heard. So if anyone knows any links to the videos that contain that information, do drop it in the comments or DM me on Discord. I would appreciate it. Next question is, can we get an auto flip for ground vehicles? And they said yes, it's definitely something that they want to allow as they bring the ground vehicles up to the same standards of ships. They're not sure how it's going to apply completely. It might be something like a tractor beam, but they will look into it when they address ground vehicles. Talking of ground vehicles, will we be able to get a speed control similar to how we have it on ships and on foot, using maybe a scroll wheel? And they said it's definitely something that they will want to set up for that. The ground vehicle controls are really old at the moment, but way behind everything else in the game, so it's something they will likely bring in. Next question, how do you decide if a ship needs tuning? Now, they said they gather lots of information, and our feedback as well does help. They use as many sources and tools as possible. Plus, they have a lot of actual quantifiable data that really helps to gather more and more information to help. And then, based on that information, they will decide whether to tune or not. Next question, will you ever remove the "this person joined your ship's" channel, as it makes sneaking on board people's ships very difficult? I have to agree. It's not a good option. The goal, they said, is to have an opt-in solution to decide whether you want to join someone's channel. And yeah, it's got to go, I'm afraid. Next question, does time to kill or time to disable reflect CIG's current intentions? And they said, currently, it is nowhere near. Capacitor gameplay is a huge part of this, so managing your ship's resources properly. Also, upcoming resource generation and item control system, having physicalized ship components that react to actual damage, that changes the way that your ship behaves. Plus the physical damage system and the new signed distance field shield system. There is a lot of stuff and a lot of impressive systems that are currently well in the works that will drastically shape up how ships fly and perform and behave, and this will directly influence the time to disable rather than it being time to kill, which is probably one of the things that I'm most looking forward to, is getting the ships into a state where the combat, their behaviors, the interactions, their final, that is going to be one hell of a day. Anyway, next question is, ship acceleration is very slow. Is there a plan to give some ship performance on certain axes? And they said yes, they are reviewing both space and atmospheric flight. And for atmosphere, ships will be getting controllable surfaces like ailerons, which will allow pilots to use the aerodynamics to maneuver, which is a much stronger force. So certain ships will be able to pull really high G maneuvers, like for example racing ships. They're not completely happy with the current G-force system as it is anyway, and they want players to take their characters' limits into account, but they have actually requested specialized spacesuits to help increase the G-force limit, which I'm really happy that they've spoken about this, so it will give us a good reason to purchase particular flight suits over others based on their G-force rating if you are going to be racing or partaking in combat, as one does. So it's very exciting to see that as a good option coming along. Next question is there anything coming to improve the racing system? And they said they're confident that with the new flight model and the upcoming controllable surfaces, this will make racing fun and worthwhile. So do expect when they improve the ship combat side of things, it will also improve racing, but they will look into that separately, I expect, later down the line if it needs a bit more work. So second to last question. Will you bring other fighters back into viability other than just the Gladius or the Arrow? I'm not sure if I read that in a good way. So they said capacitor gameplay will bring another round of retuning and balancing, and this will bring other ships back to the realm of where they need to be. It'll also push ships into more where they need to be based on what type of ship they are, be that a light fighter, a medium, a heavy, or a multi-crew fighter. So when they bring in this capacitor gameplay, obviously no dates, they will do another round of retuning and balancing, and it should keep pushing the ships to the places where they're supposed to be. So final question, was the vehicle experience team consulted in the UI HUD revamp? Very good question. And they said the vehicle experience team actually kind of prototype the UI HUD that they want and what's important to them, and then the UI team will take that information and shape it into looking good. So they do work together to make requests for what they need for function, and then the UI team just make it look super cool, which I will say the Aegis HUD rework looks phenomenal. Anyway, that is Star Citizen Live. Some really good questions and answers there. A lot of stuff they've covered already, and I do include it because we are getting more and more new backers into the game constantly, so I apologize if it's stuff you've already heard. But with saying that, even I enjoy hearing some of these things be reiterated on, but that's Star Citizen Live. Let's move on. This week, a new Plain Truth post was released talking about concerns with who's actually behind Leilani Addison's campaign, and finally the latest monthly report was released, but do not worry, I have covered this in a dedicated video along with the Squadron 42 monthly report linked in the description below. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.